Well, thank you very much for having me today to give you this presentation. I appreciate the opportunity. What I'm going to talk to you about today is a process, and I'm going to give you a tool that you'll be able to use as soon as you hang up from this conference call. You'll be able to take what I'm presenting for you today and use it in the workplace and in your personal life as well. I've actually been using this tool for probably 20 years. In fact, the organization that I used to work for, it was part of their culture. And there's a couple of reasons why I love this tool, and I'm going to give you a few reasons throughout the presentation. But first of all, I'll tell you one of the reasons I love this tool is because of the research behind it. The academic part of me loves the fact that there's a ton of research behind this tool. So there's just a little bit of an introduction for you. You can see it's called In Search of a Happier Workplace, and this is actually a shortened version of a 3-hour workshop that I give on this subject. And I designed it so that I could go into workplaces and do it over a lunch period or a break period, so to give people an idea of what this tool is. The first thing I want to say about this tool, is I'm not talking about personality. I'm going to be talking strictly about behavior, things that we can say and things that we do, so it's verbal and nonverbal. One of the things I like about this model, it doesn't get into the weeds of psychology or sociology. It's not like Myers-Briggs where you get into that part of it. This is strictly about what we see, what we hear, and what we observe. So if you want to think of this as a bit like a pie, and my favorite is apple pie. I love the smell of apple pie when it comes out of the oven. And if you think about that for a minute, a pie is made up of all kinds of ingredients. We are just going to be concentrating on the crust. That's all we're going to be doing today, is concentrating on the crust. So this is an experiential workshop. It's participatory. So we're going to start right into that right off the bat. And I'm going to ask you to grab a piece of paper in front of you. And on that piece of paper, I want you to write A, B, C, and D. And I want you to take a look, and I'm going to show you a series of slides, and I want you to answer this question for yourself. So, for example, what is your preferred way of dressing? If you say it's designer, classy, you like to dress formally, I want you to put a check mark beside the A. If you prefer to dress with more bold colors, trendy, you want to be informal, you tend to wear a lot of black, check mark B. And by the way, you probably dress all of these ways at different times, but what's your preferred way? What's your tendency? Okay? And again, don't think too heavily about this, just what comes to you. Gentle, muted colors, casual, loose sweaters, tracksuits, check mark C. And if you prefer to be dressed conservatively, more classically dressed, practical, businesslike, check D. Okay, got that one? Okay, here's the next slide. In meetings, are you more, and again, this is what you would tend to be, because you'll be all of these things at different times. Are you A, direct and to the point, check mark A, animated, excitable, friendly, check mark B. If you tend to have dreamy thoughts, you tend to be the peacemaker in those meetings and need to be a bit more casual, check mark C. If you prefer to be specific, concise, accurate in meetings, check mark D. Okay, got that? Good, let's go to the next one. Okay, this one's a fun one. I usually get some chuckles in workshops when I do this live. And that is, which is your preferred shape? So just look at those. Which one kind of resonates with you right away? Which one speaks to you? Which one do you like the best? So check mark A, B, C, or D. Okay, and if it's taking you longer than that, you're overthinking this thing. So just do it very, very quickly. Next slide. When making critical decisions, do you require A, options for various courses of actions? Do you like lots of options to think about? B, Do you like testimonials from trusted others? Like you want to get people's thoughts and ideas about it. And what do you think about that? Do you think this is a good idea or not? C, assurances and support. So if I make this decision, will you support me on that? Do you think that this is a great idea? If that's what you like, press C. If you need evidence and proof, you need the facts, you need the details in front of you, check mark D. Okay, so when making critical decisions, what do you need? Do you need those A, B, C, or D? Hopefully I'm not going too fast for you. But again, if you're taking a lot of time to think about it, you're overthinking it. Okay, next slide. So, depending on where you would like to live, where would you like to live? You know, where's your preferred place? Do you like a nice home in the suburbs, 2-story standard home? Or would you prefer to be out in the country somewhere with some acreage, some land? Would you prefer to live a cabin in the woods, someplace by a lake, someplace away from things with peace and tranquility? Or do you prefer to be in a condo or townhouse? Or do you prefer to be living right downtown in the core of a city where there's lots that you can walk out your house and there's lots of restaurants and lots to do close by? So where would you prefer to live? Maybe you're living there now. Maybe this is something you'd like to do. So pick which one you'd like there, A, B, C, or D. Okay. All righty. Now, what's your favorite vacation? When you're on vacation, what do you prefer to do? Do you like to go on like a safari? Do you like to do a lot of travel and go to adventure places? That's A. Do you just want to sit on a beach somewhere and just relax? What I call vegging. You just want to relax, maybe read some books, take it easy on the sand, somewhere hot, warm. Or do you want to stay closer to home? Do you just want to be at home? Maybe just reading and spending time with friends. Or D, do you want to go on a country tour or visit a city, go on these organized city tours? So which one of those would you prefer to do? Give you a couple of seconds on that one. So which one do you prefer there? Okay. Now, attending a seminar, would you prefer practical information that is brief and summarized, very few workshops? Do you like lots of fun, learning, jokes, analogies? Do you want to be comfortable? Do you want a low-pressure environment, no role-playing, nice people? Or do you prefer to have a logically laid out, no ambiguous information, follow the agenda? So which one of those would you prefer? Practical information, just brief, to the point, very few workshops. Do you want to have a lot of fun? Do you want to be in a comfortable environment, no role playing, just nice people? Or finally, do you want it to be logically laid out? This is the plan we're following. This is the agenda item. We're starting this time. We're ending that time. So which one do you prefer there? Great. Okay, so which one? Here we just got a couple of more. Just a couple of more. Which of the following motivates you more than the others? Which one of the following motivates you more than the others? Is it getting and seeing results? Is it recognition and applause? Is it personal attention and friendship? And is it lots of organized activity going on? So B is recognition, you know, pats on the back, a great job, way to go, which is different than C. Personal attention is being part of the group, being part of a team situation. Okay, that's a slight difference there between B and C. So which ones do you think is that? Okay, couple more. Okay, I'm gonna go to this one. What's your preferred way to sleep? Do you prefer to sleep on your back, in a cuddle or fetal position, on your side with your knees slightly bent, and on your stomach with your arms up by your head? That should be pretty quick. You should be able to check that one off really quick. Brilliant. Okay, so now, what do you think? again, check. If you think you're highly assertive and reserved, check A. If you think you're highly assertive and outgoing, check B. If you think you're less assertive and outgoing, C, and less assertive and reserved, D. So figure out which one that is. Okay, so what I want you to do now is take each one of those sections, the A's, and count up how many check marks you had. And B, the same thing, how many check marks you had. C, how many check marks you had, and D. So count those up, just how many you have. And you may have one that's higher than the others. You may have some that are, you're tied maybe with some, or some are very, very close. So take a look at what you scored there. And if you scored if you had more checks in the A, does that definition in A sort of sound like you? Getting to the bottom line of complex problems and making critical decisions? Or is B sound more like you? You like to see the big picture, conceptualizing, using your intuition and being more creative? Or is it C? Or is it D? So A is getting to the bottom of complex problems and making critical decisions. B is seeing the bigger picture, conceptualizing, using your intuition and being creative. C is interpersonal relationships are important to you, helping others get along, expressing feelings as comfortably as ideas, and working on teams. And D is establishing standards. Okay, so just see what you think. And if you think what you have more check marks does not agree with any of those, maybe circle which one you think does feel more comfortable with you. Okay. All right, we're going to put that aside for a second. We're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to this in a second, but let's put it aside for a second. And let's now look at the model itself. So this was, by the way, what we just did wasn't scientific by any stretch of the imagination. It's fairly loose, but it'll give us a good idea of where each of us individually sits. And I said there's a couple of reasons why I like this model. Another reason why I love this model is because it helps us figure out ourselves. First of all, if we can figure out who we are, it's a great starting point. The second piece of the model is learning about other people and where other people might fit on the model. So that's what I want to take you through an exercise now in the next section. So I'm going to introduce you to the model, and the first dimension of the model is called assertiveness. And what I want you to do is I want you to think of somebody in your mind's eye. Think of somebody in your mind's eye, somebody you work with, or maybe a family member, although that could be a little dangerous. But maybe think about a friend, a colleague, a peer, okay? And I want you to think of him in terms of this first dimension, which, by the way, is not aggressive. Assertiveness is not, how aggressive somebody gets. It's basically how much they are viewed as tell assertive or ask assertive. Okay, so in other words, when they come to you, do they say things in a telling way? Do they say things like, I want to show you what we're doing here? Or do they say things in an asking way? Can I show you what we're doing here? See, there's a subtle difference there. And by the way, this person you're thinking of might do both, but what do they have a tendency to do more of? And if you'll notice, there's a scale here. So people can be more telling, they could be more asking. Another way of thinking this is fast. Do they move fast? Do they come to ideas fast? Do they think fast, or do they talk slower, or think slower, move slower? So here's a slide to kind of help you figure this out. This person that you're thinking of, their pace of speech, do they kind of talk fast? Do they talk slow? Do they talk a lot? They have a lot to say, or they have a little bit to say? Do they tend to speak louder or quieter? Okay. And then think of the non-verbal behaviors. Do they use their hands a lot? Do they use their hands or not so much? Do they tend to lean forward when they talk, or do they tend to lean back? Do they move closer to you, or do they tend to move back? The eye contact, are they for you? Do they look right at you? Or do they kind of look away? Okay, you got this person in your mind's eye, you're kind of thinking where they may be. And again, they could be anywhere on the scale. They could be at the far end, or they could be in the middle here. And what do they tend to do more often than not? So that's the first dimension. Here's the second dimension. And by the way, if any of you on the call here today have done DISC assessment, you'll notice a very similarity between this and DISC. And as we get into the model, you'll be going, oh, you know, that sounds like DISC. And it is very much like DISC. I actually like to call this model DISC for dummies, because it is, again, I think a much more simpler way of looking at this model. So here's the other dimension, which is responsiveness. Think of this in terms of emotions. Does the person control their emotion a lot? So this person you're thinking about, do they control their emotion a lot? Or do they tend to show their emotion on their sleeves? You know, they tend to be very emotional. They don't have no problems hiding their feelings. And again, they can be anywhere up and down this scale. So let's show you another slide to help you out here. On the verbal side, how they speak, do they tend to be monotone? Or do they have lots of inflection in their voice? When they're talking, is it about tasks and facts and data? Or is it more about people and they use lots of stories and opinions? Okay, you're thinking about this person, where they might be when they're talking, they kind of talk about the task at hand and what they're actually doing, or is it more about the people involved? And again, on nonverbal side, they're used to their hands, using a lot of their hands or less. And their body posture, their body, how they hold themselves. Do they tend to be rigid, or are they more casual in the way they stand? And their facial expression. Are they more controlled, or they're more animated? So you got that person in your mind's eye? Great. So let's take these two dimensions and put them together. And when we put them together, what we get is this model right here. And the social style model actually has been around since the 1960s. It was developed by two industrial psychologists initially for the US Navy. And over the years, as I said, one of the reasons I love it is the research behind it. But one of the other reasons I love this model is because it's very easy to start identifying maybe where people sit. Which brings up another important part of this, is again, this is not personality. It's got nothing to do with being introverted or extroverted. And there's no good or bad. There's no good or bad to this. It's not that this is a bad style or a good style. It is just what it is. And so we can take this model now and we put it together, and you'll see that we have 4 quadrants. So if somebody tends to move fast, is more teleassertive, is quick to action, and tends to control their emotions more, then we can say that they have a driving style. Now, I don't like putting people in boxes. I don't like labeling people. But let's just think of this in terms of we're naming this particular style as a driving style. And those people can be identified or described as independent, formal, practical, dominating. Okay? If person is teleassertive, likes to move fast, comes to decisions quickly, but tends to be show their emotions more, then they can be seen to be, or said to be, expressives. And they can be described as animated, they can be described as forceful, opinionated, and they can be described as impulsive. And again, people can be anywhere on this scale. They can be anywhere on this scale. They can be way out here somewhere, they can be closer in here. But generally speaking, we can say that they fit this style. The third one is if they tend to be emotional, show their emotions more than others. And if they are more assertive, we can say that they're amiable. And they can be described as dependable, supportive, pliable, and open. And you'll notice that there's positives and negatives to all these. That's because it's neither good or bad. It is what it is. Finally, we have analyticals. They're people that tend to control their emotions more and tend to ask rather than tell. They tend to ask and they tend to be slower, and they can be seen as serious, exacting, indecisive, or logical. So, for example, indecisive. Somebody asked me once, what do you mean by indecisive? If somebody is analytical, that is about the facts and information, how can they be indecisive? Well, they can be indecisive because of the very fact that they want to be right. They want to have everything set up in a specific way, and they want to be right. Now, a number of years ago, when I first learned this, as I said, I learned this model about 20 years ago. And when I was first introduced to it, I had some challenges trying to get my head around it until I took a workshop probably 4 or 5 years into learning this model. I took a workshop at the University of Toronto, and the person I talked to at the time was teaching this model, and he used birds to symbolize the different styles. And as soon as I saw this, I went, okay, this makes sense. So I'm going to share that with you. So, for example, he said the people that are analytical, if you think of owls, now in the Western cultural context, owls are seen as knowledgeable, wise, the wise owls, right? So you get this idea of wisdom, of knowledge. So think of analyticals as owls. He used doves for amiables, because amiables are seen as being part of the team, the part of being supportive of one another. They're seen as being dependable. They're peacemakers. And in our cultural context, doves are seen as a peace symbol, right? So he used doves for amiable. So if you think about that, they always want things to be going well, and it's all about peace and teamwork, and let's all get together. For drivers, he used the symbol of eagles, because again, if you think of it in the Western cultural context, eagles are seen as the powerful. We have a saying called being eagle-eyed, which means you have your eye on the vision, you have the eye on the results, and you just go for it. It's about being independent, it's about dominating, it's about being on task. And the last one is peacock. And if you haven't figured it out yet, that's where I sit. I'm a peacock. And he used peacocks because expressives want to be the center of attention. It's here I am, see me, I'm here, take a look, you can't miss me. They're animated, they tend to be forceful, they tend to be opinionated, and they tend to be impulsive. So for example, I used to have a boss that said to me, John, the problem with you is you ready, shoot, aim. You ready, shoot, aim. You're always going off. You're impulsive. So expressives can be seen as somebody who wants that personal attention, wants a pat on the backs, and are impulsive. So why is this all important? Let's go back to this importance. So the person you were thinking of, where do they sit? Okay, just think about where they may be sitting. And now go back to that little quiz I had you do. And if you answered A, if you had mostly A's, you would be in the driving quadrant. If you said yourself were a B, you'd be in, you join me, welcome to the club, in the expressive group. If you said C, you are in the amiable club, which by the way is where my wife sits, is in the amiable club. And then if you say D, if you said D, you fit in the analytical style. Another way to think it, so that's where you sit. So what's important about this? Where do you sit in compared to where the person you were thinking sit? Maybe you're in the same area. Okay, so if you know that, does this help recognizing, oh, that's why that person is doing X, Y, Z? It's because he tends to be in here. He tends to be independent. He tends to be formal. But let's say I'm an expressive, and let's say the person that I'm thinking of fell into the analytical style. I'm impulsive. If I recognize that I'm impulsive, I recognize that I just want to go off and do things, But I'm working with somebody who's an analytical, who wants information, who wants data, who wants to make sure that things are done right. I'm going, why can't, okay, well, that's why he's taking his time. That's why he is needing that information. So if I can recognize that, then I can say, okay, that's the way it is. And I can deal with that. Now, in a perfect world, I would be doing that, right? I would be moving towards this guy over here, this fellow, this co-worker. I'd be working towards him and saying, okay, I recognize what you're doing. And this individual would be working towards me and recognizing the style that I am. But the reality is, that's not the real world. Okay? So in my workshops, I talk about how we have the golden rule. And most people know what the golden rule is. The golden rule says you treat others how you want to be treated. So you treat others how you want to be treated, how you feel you should be treated. Well, this is how I feel about it. In my workshops, though, I introduce something called the platinum rule, and some of you may already be aware of the platinum rule. And the platinum rule says you treat others how they want to be represented. You treat others how they want to be treated. So I always keep in a mind's eye that I need to be making sure, okay, what does this person want? What does this person need? And I want to be working towards that. Okay. So I'm going to talk about some key characteristics. But at this point, I just in the comment section, maybe you've got some questions you're thinking about already. Maybe you want to put in the comment section, what your style is, and do you agree with it or not? And also, what is resonating with you now that you know this much? What is resonating with you right now? What are you seeing? What are you saying? What are you seeing? And if you've got some questions, we're going to have a Q&A in about 15 minutes or so. So I'll get the moderator to bring those up. So what's resonating with you? I'd be interested to see what some of you are thinking. Okay. So far what I've done is I've shown you the model. I've given you an idea where you may be sitting. And I've given you an example of one person and how where that person might be. Okay. And in my coaching world, I spent a lot of time in trying to help people self-discover, become self-aware. And again, I think one of the reasons why I love this model is because it allows us to do that. It allows us to figure out, okay, I can draw little quadrants and I can be looking at somebody and I can say, are they moving kind of fast? Are they tele-assertive? Are they making decisions quickly, or are they taking their time? And then from that, I can say, well, do they tend to be, are they showing a lot of emotion, or are they guarding their emotion? And over time, I can kind of figure out where they may be. And based on that, then I can actually send you based on that, I can say, okay, well, this probably person needs X, Y, Z, and this is the information they need. So, which is what I'm going to get to in a couple of minutes. Okay, so let's carry on then. So I want to talk about some of the key characteristics of each style. And each style can actually be broken down to 3 characteristics: need, orientation, and growth action. And the style need is how you can observe what they're doing, right? What do they need to fulfill their style? Style orientation is the behavior that they use to reach that need or reach that goal. And the third one, which I think is probably the most critical one for ourselves, is what do we need to do to make sure that we are able to connect with those other styles? Okay. So for example, let's take a look at the driving style in the top right-hand corner there. Their need, the driver's need, is results. Remember about the eagle, it's about eagle-eyed, it's being on task, getting it done. And their orientation then is action. It's just getting things done. So for example, if you've got somebody that you're working with, and maybe you're seeing yourself in this, who has a driving style, it's like, I don't care how it's done, just get it done, right? So here's the third piece, their growth action. For somebody in the driving style to grow and to develop more is to listen. And what I mean by that is, because they're on this side of the fast-slow scale, they need to slow down and they need to listen. And it's not just listening to others, by the way, it's listening to themselves and listening to their own small voice in the back of their head. They need to slow down and they need to listen. So if I'm coaching somebody who is in a driving style, I work with them on learning how that they can self-regulate slowing down. I help them find something that's a trigger for them to help them slow down. So you're going to get if you haven't got it already, at the end I'll share my website with you. And on my website I've got a couple of video testimonials, and one is a client by the name of Terrell. And that's what Terrell said. Terrell said what he had to do is he had to learn how to slow down and listen. And when he was able to do that, it was amazing what he was able to change in his workplace. In fact, he said his wife made the comment that he's not as angry as he used to be. She doesn't see him as being angry. It wasn't that he was necessarily angry. People saw him that way because he was just always focused on getting things done. Some people think that drivers don't care. They actually do care. It's just that how they act, other people perceive them that way. Let's go to analytical. Their need is to be right. That's what their need is, to be right, to always be right. And their orientation is thinking. So their growth action, because they're on the slow side, they have to speed up a little bit. They have to speed up and they have to make a decision. Some of you have heard of the term the paralysis of analysis. Somebody that's sitting way over here in the analytical scale, they just can't make a decision because they don't think they've got enough data. They've not got enough information. So I was doing a workshop that long ago with a group, and one of he was actually the CEO, said, well, you know, I can't let people who are analyticals in my group continue to get data. I can't just leave them alone and keep doing, doing research. And I said, no, what you recognize though is you recognize that analyticals need information. They need to collect information. They need to be comfortable. But what you do is you put boundaries around it. So you say to them, go research this, but I need that information by XYZ date. I need that information by XYZ date. So you're putting boundaries on it. But recognize, especially if you're a driver in a management leadership role and you have analyticals working for you, you have to recognize that they need that space. Okay. The other thing is you recognize the fact that they need to be right. So one of the tricky things about leading analyticals is you have to help them be right even when they're wrong. So it's working with them to help them feel that they come to a conclusion. So their growth action is that they have to make a decision. Amiables, their need is personal security. Think of the dove. It's about being a peacemaker. It's being part of the team. They've got to feel that everyone's getting along. So that's their need. That's where they feel secure. They feel secure in the group. So their orientation is relationships, making those relationships work. So their growth action is, again, they need to speed up a bit. They need to speed themselves up a bit, and they have to initiate actions that may hurt other people's feelings. There are times when they have to do that, and they have to recognize they do that. I coach a leader right now who is an amiable. And what she's been able to do is figure out that there are times when she has to put on, metaphorically, her leadership hat. So she imagines herself putting on a leadership hat, and she says to herself, and sometimes she verbalizes this to other people, she says, my role requires me to have this conversation, or my role means that I need to do X, Y, Z. So that's how she's able to handle that. That's how she's able to initiate those decisions. But she recognizes that she has the problem she's had with leadership is because this is where she lives. This is her neighborhood right here. But you know what? Sometimes she has to leave her neighborhood and travel over here. And to do that, she's recognized she's had to put on another hat. All right. So that's amiable. And by the way, here's the thing about amiables, because I mentioned I am married to one. Here's something you have to be careful about amiables. Amiables, like will say, oh yeah, whatever you want, that's fine, I'm good with that. It's called acquiescing, right? You come to them with an idea and they say, sure, if you think that's a good idea, do it. And they'll keep doing that. But every time they do that, what I call they collect a stamp. They collect a stamp. They collect a stamp. And then one day it'll just blow up on you. And you go, where the heck did that come from? It's because they'll just keep doing it. At some point they've had enough and they just blow up. It's quite funny to see, actually. But again, so if you've got somebody, if you happen to live over here in the driving style and you have somebody who's working here for you who's amiable, you want to know that even if they say, yeah, sure, whatever, boss, they may not necessarily mean that. They're saying that because this is their comfort zone. This is where they live. They don't want to be a troublemaker. So as a driving style, if you're aware of that, you want to say, no, really, tell me what you feel. I'm really interested in what you want to know. Or in meeting settings, you call them out. You say, I haven't heard from you. What do you think? You want to make sure you do that. Finally, expressives. Their need is personal approval. And I'm speaking from personal experience here because I am an expressive. They need the personal approval. Okay, here's a hint for you. If you want to know if you've got expressive working for you, if they've got an office, walk into their office. And they should have every certificate and every award they've ever earned on their wall. And in fact, if you look at my wall in my office here, I've got my degrees and my certificates that are all over the place. Right? It's like, here I am, look what I've done, look how amazing I am. That's what an expressive is. Their orientation, as I said already, is spontaneity. Forget instructions. If I go to IKEA and buy IKEA furniture, forget the instructions. I'll just start putting it together. And when I'm finished and I've got a bits and pieces left over, I'll go, oh, now I have to look at the instructions. So it's spontaneity. So interestingly enough, my growth action is, and other expressives, they need to slow down, right? Because they're on the fast side of the scale. They need to slow down and they have to check their emotional stance. They have to check their emotional stance. Like, why am I, what's going on here? So for an example, I was coaching a young lady in an office. She was a executive assistant for a VP. The VP asked me to come in and work with this individual because she would tend to get, she was way over here, what I call a flaming expressive. She was way over here. She was an expressive. And so I had to get her to slow down. And the way to do that was, and she came up with this, she got Post-it notes, little sticky notes, and she put them on a computer monitor. She put them on notebooks. When she was walking into a meeting, she'd have them in a notebook, and she wrote in big block letters, wait, W-A-I-T, wait, in big block letters. And for her, that was her trigger, because whenever she looked at that, for her, that meant, why am I talking? Why am I talking? So she was able to take that and slow herself right down and then check her emotional stance. And the word I got back from the vice president was incredible, the change that they saw in this individual. Actually, the very little disruption in the office. Why? Because this person recognized where she was. And her boss, who was a driving style, again, very fast too, but more controlling emotion, her boss recognized where this person was and recognized why this person was acting that way. So instead of, coming down or giving this executive assistant grief and, being a driver and saying, well, look, all you need to do is forget the emotional stuff, just go do it. She recognized that. She slowed down and said, we need to work with this person. She recognized that. And so that helped reduce the stress. And I'll tell you, that reduced the stress in that workplace significantly. One other quick example for you. I was called into an office which had a four-person office, and yes, you guessed right. Each individual was a style. So the boss was actually a driving style. Doesn't always work out that way, but it was. And there was an analytical, there was an able, and there was an expressive. And it was interesting because once we got into this model, they started looking at each other and saying, okay, now I figure out that's why you're doing that. So for example, the boss every morning would walk into the office, walk right through the office and go to right through the main office and go to her own office. After we had the workshop and we talked a little bit about this, she decided she was going to slow down, and she walked by and she made sure she said hello to everybody and greeted everybody. That was just one little small step, but it made a big difference. She also recognized that her administrative assistant happened to be an analytical, and she would walk into the administrative assistant's office and drop paperwork on her desk and say, I need this by this afternoon, and walk out. Of course, the poor analytical had a day all planned. She knew exactly what she was doing. And this just frustrated her, terribly frustrated her. Once, though, they recognized each other's styles, the driver recognized, no, the analytical needed more time, needed to process it, try and give her more time. The analytical realized, okay, she's not being, a jerk. That's just who she is, and that's her style, and I recognize that. So again, they started to work towards one another, and it worked. So I've got about 5 minutes, 10 minutes left in the presentation. So let me just go to these key points for you. It's not personality, it's behavior. It's not personality, it's behavior. We're only talking about surface behavior here. It's what you can see people do, what you hear them say is social style. It's not an absolute, it's a degree. People will be analyticals at sometimes, they'll be expressives at sometimes, they'll be drivers at sometimes. But there's one thing that they are more than the other. There's a neighborhood that they like to live in, a place that they feel comfortable, that's their home, and that's their primary style. Okay? And there's no best style, it's just the way it is. So I asked you, I said earlier on, if you're kind of wondering about what style you are, here's my drop dead. This is how you can look at somebody and figure out where they may be, okay? This is my drop dead decider on what a person's style is, and it's their backup behavior. It's what they do when they're under stress. It's what they do to reduce stress, okay? So, people do 4 things when they're under stress. So if they become autocratic, so they'll just take personal charge. So they'll say something like, oh, I'll just go do it. Let me just go do this. Oh, don't worry about it, I'll do it. And they just take over. That's autocratic. If they do that, more often than not, they're most probably a driver. If they tend to avoid things, they forget that they're there, they ignore them, they let them go by, then they're probably an analytical. Finally, again, I mentioned this already a little bit when I was talking about amiables. Amiables acquiesce. They'll go along with things. Hey, no problem, sure, whatever you want to do. Hey, if that's the movie you want to go see tonight, that's fine. Oh, that's the restaurant you want to, that's great. Yeah, no problem, let's do that. If they acquiesce a lot, then they're probably amiables. And finally, if they attack, I don't mean physical attack, but they just get verbally confrontational. For example, I was in a workshop once and I did the slide thing, and somebody said, yeah, I don't know if I'm an expressive. And I said, well, what do you do when you get under stress? And she said, well, I kind of get pissy. And I said, well, there you go. That's you say something without thinking. Something comes out of your mouth just to kind of dig somebody, right? And it was hilarious. I'd go to in my last role, I'd go to operational meetings, and the senior vice president used to often sit, executive vice president usually sat across from me. And I knew as soon as if I said something without thinking, he just looked at me. That's all he did. He'd look at me and raise his eyebrow and knew exactly what I'd done. I'd said something without thinking, maybe to kind of reduce the tension. So that's an important piece. That's my drop dead. reminder of how to do this, how to figure out what a person's style is, okay? So there's some tips there, and I believe these slides are going to be made available, so I think you'll be able to go back and see them. At least there's going to be a recording of this, so you'll be able to, if you want to review some of these slides, you can do that. But there's some tips for dealing with backup behavior, okay? I just want to go to this last one, though, because there's some practices for observing other styles. Some important reminders here. Try not to look at the style too quickly. You can use that backup one, but you want to look at somebody over time and observe somebody over time. So a piece of homework I often give my clients is pick somebody in your office, pick somebody in your workplace, and observe them over the next week. Draw that quadrant, right? Fast, slow, tell, ask. The tell, ask, and then the control emotion and shows emotion. And see where they fit in those. Where do you think they might fit? Okay. Don't let your own feelings interfere. Concentrate on how the person is acting. Okay. Avoid any good, bad, or why judgments. So, you know, it just is what it is. There's no good or bad. This is just the way the person behaves. That's their style. Learn to deal with it. Learn to figure out what that person needs. The platinum rule. Okay. Observe others under moderate stress to clarify their style. That's just what we just finished talking about. And if someone is busy reacting to a new style, you'll find it very difficult to observe. So you might want to give them, you know, time to, you know, the time is allow them to show themselves. Okay. Finally, my email address is on there. I have these little cards that I have. I don't know, they're 3x4 cards, 3x5 cards that I produce. That in my last role, when I was managing a sales team of about 20 salespeople, each one of my sales team carried these around with them, because when they feel going into a client meeting, they can figure out, okay, where would this person fit? And what do I need to remind myself of? So if you'd like to email me, I'm more than happy to email you copies of these cards so you can have them and you can use them as a tool. So that's it for my presentation today on In Search of a Happy Workplace, trying to figure out where people's different styles are, learning how they react and what, not necessarily why they react, but just recognizing they react and what you may be able to do to help relieve that tension in the workplace. So here's the time to provide for questions that people may have, and if I can answer any questions from the room. Okay, so I'm not hearing anything. There we go. So I'm not sure if anybody's hearing the oh, great. I clicked to mute myself.
Hello, sorry, there was a slight technical glitch about the audio, and folks, we're open for Q&A, so if you have any questions, you can either insert it in the question box or you could equally raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the console, so if you want to speak directly with the speaker, you can raise your hand. Let me go to the question box. There are a couple of questions already popped up. There's first one. My boss is a driver's driver. Any suggestions how to work with them?
That's a really good question. And it's really interesting. You know, you may actually be a driver yourself, but if they could be a driver, and you could be a driver amiable, actually. So you view them as off the road. It's really, here's the thing I always say about dealing with drivers. If you have a meeting scheduled with a driver and it's a 30-minute meeting, plan for 15, because after 15 minutes, they're ready to go on the next thing. So you may, if you're an analytical and you've got all this information, go in with half the information behind your back. Okay, go in, present with half the information behind your back. Give them half the information. And then if they ask, well, what else can you tell me? Then bring out the rest. So be prepared to shorten the meeting, prepared to give them less information than you maybe think that they actually need. And it's not that they don't care. That's all they really need. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you very much. We have a caller who has raised a hand, so let me go straight to Brother Shoaib Al-Falabi Salisu. Brother Shoaib, could you please introduce yourself and ask a question?
My name is Shoaib. I'm calling from Nigeria. Two quick questions. I have worked with a number of bosses, and I tend to believe that the driving social styles seems to be the most effective. Mm-hmm. Secondly, will it be helpful for members of a management team to actually know each other's social style? Will it be helpful for them to work better together?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. I love that question. Thank you for asking it. You know, you're right. In a perfect world, right, people should be able to, in a perfect world, people should know each other's styles, but it doesn't always work that way. But yes, the ideal is if you have an idea where people sit, it sure makes it a lot easier to work with them and at least have some understanding. And if everybody has it on the same plane with the same recognition, oh, that's why that person's acting that way. If they can think about it in those terms, it certainly is helpful for sure. Did that answer your question for you?
Yes, thank you, Doc.
Yeah, good. And by the way, not all bosses are drivers. As I used in my example, a leader of an organization. It is a non-profit organization, mind you, but a leader of the non-profit organization that I'm working for who is very much an amiable. So people can have different styles, different roles.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Brother Shoaib, for asking the question. Now let me go back to the question box. There's another one. I'm a driving style, and the person you asked me to think about is an amiable. How do you give them directions or manage them?
Oh, yeah. I think I did touch a little bit on this in the workshop, in the webinar, and that is recognizing that someone's an amiable and that their tendency is to acquiesce. Okay, it's always about wanting to be, they don't want to rock the boat because they're afraid of upsetting people. And so it's about making sure that you give them the opportunity to speak up, give them the opportunity to say their mind, to know that that there is probably a challenge. They probably have a challenge speaking their mind, speaking up. So you want to give them that space. That's probably the key to it. And recognizing that if they do blow up, it's probably because they're just really stressed out. So for example, I showed the backup style. The backup style for an amiable is acquiescing. However, the opposite, right? If you look across the quadrant, the opposite of the amiable is a driver style, and theirs is autocratic. And actually, amiables can get autocratic. And if you have an amiable, somebody you're working for you think's an amiable, and they've gone autocratic on you, that's a huge red flag for you. That tells you that there's really some problems going on here with that individual.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hopefully that answered that question.
Yes, thank you. And we have one last question. You say that analytical style people need time to gather information, but I run an office where things have to get done. I can't let that person keep collecting data forever. So what do I do?
Right. Well, I think in situations like that, one of the things I talk to clients about, I use the terms intentions and expectations. And this falls under those expectations. So when I'm talking to somebody, I want to be very clear with the intent of what I'm saying, right? In the instructions that I'm giving. But part of that is also the expectations. So you can't let people go on and on collecting data, that's for sure. Especially if they're an analytical, because they'll never come up with the answer because they never think they've got enough information. So you do want to create boundaries around it. So you may say something like, you know, we've got this XYZ project. I need this. I'm looking for this information. I'd like you to go gather this information, and I'd like to have it on my desk by, and you give them a date and a time. Can I have it by, you know, Tuesday at noon? If you could get it Tuesday at noon, I would really appreciate that. And if for some reason you aren't able to do that, if you can let me know, give me a heads up. Do you think that that's something you can do? Do you think you'll be able to get that information? And if the person says, yeah, I think I can do that for you, great. All right, so I'll expect to see it then. So you put boundaries around it, right? You put boundaries around them to make sure that they know that the expectation is that they'll have it by X date. Or they'll just kind of go off and do what they want to do. They'll just keep collecting data until the cows come home.
All right. So, but there's another question popped up. Yeah. So let me read it if you allow me. From Mr. Faisal Al-Maklas. The question is: do you think it is easy as it is explained to read books or co-worker style, then accelerate dealing with them?
Well, like I say, we're in a real world situation, right? And again, there's always going to be hit and misses. And I always talk about generalities. We got to think of this in generalities. Just because we may think a person is maybe a driving style, it isn't that they won't show emotions. They may show emotions sometimes. So it's being flexible. We call, in the model, social style model, they call it versatility. And its versatility is how versatile I am at dealing with other people, how I can moderate my own style. For example, as an expressive, how I can temper the emotion side of me, and how I can slow down to meet somebody else who may be an amiable, who may be an analytical, or maybe I need to speed up a little bit for a driver. So that's called versatility, and how versatile I am. Just a quick, funny story about that, just to close this off. Number